Tonight's episode is brought to you by Tagged and Bagged. They specialize in pre-taxidermy packaging for waterfowl. Their mission is to provide hunters with the highest quality packaging products to ensure preservation of a hunter's prized trophy. Tagged and Bagged products are made with the best materials and are designed to withstand the toughest hunting conditions. Check them out at taggedandbagged.net. This show is also brought to you by Buck.It Ready. Buck.It Ready offers premium food plot seed for the best results when attracting wildlife to your property. Knowing what deer prefer, when they prefer it, and putting the best seed together for deer and your special hunting spot is what Buck.It Ready Performance Food Plot Seed Mixtures is all about. Check them out today at buckitready.com.
What is an eponym? A person after whom a discovery, invention, or place is named or thought to be named. There are very few eponyms in the hunting industry. A product so popular and so functional, it becomes the act of the product. So how does something become an eponym? It's the best, hands down.
All right, welcome everybody back to another episode of the Midwest Racks and Rods Outdoors Show. I'm your host, Scott Biskobing. We apologize again for last week's episode there where we lost audio. For those of you that tuned in, I think we got that figured out now. Well, obviously, I'll be keeping an eye on to see if I get any messages from you guys saying otherwise. However, that show from last week, we will be doing a reboot or a do-over, I guess, if you will, tomorrow night. So check that out when we bring Brett Backus and Nick Faber back onto the show to talk about A Season to Remember. So with that said, I'd like to introduce our guests for tonight's show. We are joined by Scott Hoelzel, the founder and owner of Buck.It Ready. And we're also joined by Sam Smith. Not that Sam Smith, this Sam Smith. In fact, Scott, you and I kind of joked about that a little bit today when you said Sam. I said, what's Sam's last name? He goes, Smith. I'm like, singer-songwriter Sam Smith?
Biggest questions I get asked if I'm a singer-songwriter or if it's a fake name.
Well, it's a good name. It's a good name either which way. I'm assuming English background.
Exactly.
Yeah. So how are you guys doing tonight?
Hey, we're doing pretty good.
Good.
Thanks for having us on the show here today.
Yeah, absolutely, Scott. I mean, I know we've been working with you guys here for several years now, and figured, you know what, it's about time we get Scott on here and talk about this product a little bit. But fear not, guys, this isn't going to be just a big product placement. We obviously want to talk about the company and the cool things that Buck.It Ready has to offer. We're also going to get into some of the bucks in that Scott's killed, and maybe get into some of the stories and tactics involved with that. So with that said, Scott, can you tell us a little bit about your background just in the outdoors in general? Like how you got started?
Yeah, so I actually got started a little bit later in life in the outdoors. I mean, my dad brought me hunting when I was younger, but I was big into sports and I played college basketball. So I didn't really, peak basketball seasons during hunting season, especially whitetail hunting season. So I didn't have a whole lot of time for the outdoors and hunting. But post-college, that's really when I started hitting it hard. I got really big into bow hunting through a friend. His name was Jeff Belo. Everyone called him Doc. But he kind of took me under his wing, and he was a phenomenal whitetail and a phenomenal bow hunter. And he taught me a lot. And I also met my wife in college, and her father worked in the egg industry. He was also he also used to farm. He retired farmer. So him and I, that's how the food plots got started. Him and I started doing food plots together, hunting, and the whole shebang. But I wasn't until 21 when I really started hitting the woods hard. And in 22, 23, I started doing all the food plotting with my father-in-law.
Sure.
And that led us down the road here in 2025 to 6 years in business. This is year number 7 for Buck.It Ready. So,
Wow. Time flies, right? When you're having a good time.
right, it's absolutely crazy. It just don't know where time goes sometimes.
Yeah. So that's kind of what started it, right? And then what was kind of like the process of getting that company going? Like, what made you finally decide that, you know what, we can make a business out of this?
Yeah, so I mean, really, my father-in-law and my mother-in-law pushed me because my father-in-law always wanted to just do, the standard stuff, corns, beans, alfalfa,
Sure.
maybe a little bit of like ladino clover, but um, I was the one that wanted to start experimenting and doing all these other things and formulating all the different mixes that we offer. And he had some connections and things. He's like, you really should start a food plot business because it just fits you very well. And he gave me some connections, and we just started formulating everything. And next thing you know, we launched Buck.It Ready.
Yeah, that's awesome. Where did the name come from?
Well, we wanted to be unique, so we had to come up with a name that was unique and catchy.
Mm,
Um, so we thought about like, well, packaging. Like, what could we do for packaging that would be easy, very catchy, and also something that's durable too, right? So the bucket. That's kind of what we came up with,
yeah.
and then we just kept going down the lines and coming up with ideas. We kept. I mean, if we had that filmed about all the different names and not even all the Buck.It Ready name, just all the taglines we were joking about
Sure.
with Buck.It Ready, right? Um, but that's kind of how it started. Putting things in a bucket, right? And then
Right.
coming up with a catchy name with it. Um, and it's not spelled traditionally like a normal word bucket. And the reason that is because there's a company in Chicago that cleans. They're a cleaning company, and they call themselves Buck.It Ready. So or not Buck.It Ready. They had a different name, but anyway, it was taken, and so that's where we came up with the bucket
Yeah.
and the ready.
Right. Yeah. There's some connotation there,
Yeah.
much like Midwest racks and rods. we get, I get, I'll go on record here and say, look, I did not come up with the name. That was something that Jason and Chris had started. I was the last one to actually join Midwest Racks and Rods Outdoors. In fact, I'm the one that added the outdoors at the end because it was just Midwest Racks and Rods. And I'm like, there's some connotation there, or some ways of looking at that a little bit differently. I mean, even from the logo, I actually had a buddy who's in the military, and some years ago, we have a flag. In fact, it's right over here. It's a black flag. It looks very similar to what you see on the screen behind me. But he saw us because we would fly it sometimes when we'd be out ice fishing and that for different events, different tournaments and things. And we'd have this thing flying, and I had a picture of it, and he sent me a message, and he goes, I'm in the military, right? He's like, you're that flag there. Why are you flying an ISIS flag? And I'm like, what are you talking about? I'm like, that's our logo on that. And then I kind of looked at the picture and that, and then I'm like, I guess I can see it, but I mean, you better get your eyes checked there, chucklehead. I mean, if you're in the military and you can't tell the difference between an ISIS flag and a Midwest Racks and Rods flag,
Right.
you guys might be in trouble over there. But anyways, I digress. No, it's a great name. So what were some of the first products you came out with Buck.It Ready? What were some? I mean, I'm assuming probably clover right off the bat. I mean, that,
Yep.
that's
Yeah.
a
So
pretty common.
we came out with 7 products initially. There were two, perennial mixes, our fence jumper mix and our clover madness mix. Those both are clover madness is mainly clover and just a little bit of alfalfa. And our fence jumpers, alfalfa, clover, and chicory. So those are our true perennial mixes. And then we also had a cover crop mix that we came out called Forage Feast, and that's just peas, oats, and triticale. So those were the three, springtime. Obviously, you can plant clovers in the fall as
Sure.
well. But those, and then we had 4 blends beyond that, and those blends were, Party Time, Buck Booyah, Double Trouble, and Harvest Patch. Those are all Nebraska-based blends. Harvest Patch has some cereal rice and winter peas in it. But we came out with a nice nice offering, a nice variety of choices for people to choose from. But we also sell individual seed too. So we don't sell our mixes. We kind of sell a little bit of everything. And we always had that custom mix feature on our website that allows people to go and select whatever variety of seed they want, poundage, and we mix it up for them and ship it out to them. So
Nice.
yeah, and we're slowly adding more products. But how many products can you really add? You
Right.
get so many mixes. Um, that's where the whole custom mixing feature is really nice for guys. Or a lot of guys say, "Hey, I want your Clover Madness mix, but can you throw some chicory in with it?" And I said, "Sure, not a problem." Right. So um,
Yeah, I don't think you
it's
get
just
that.
flexibility, right? That's the biggest thing with us. We want to be flexible. We want to accommodate everybody. But we do have our
Yeah.
base mixes, which we've tested and have been proven and work very well.
Nice. Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's a lot of companies that out there that are going to allow you to be that customizable, short of going to a local elevator or something like that. And I mean, I don't know what the quality of seed is. What would you say is the one thing that kind of like sets you apart though, like from the vast majority of these companies? Because we know that there's quite a few choices out there.
Oh yeah, there is a lot of choices out there. There's good and there's bad choices, and the main thing for people to know, because there's a lot of good companies. I mean, for the most part, all these companies that sell seed they do sell good products, right?
Sure.
But it's all about looking at the analysis tag. Look at that back of the analysis tag. See what is the purity of all the seed. Making sure we can get into things like coatings on seed versus raw seed. Everyone's got a little bit different philosophy about that. Coated seed is really it's a filler, but you do get better germination rates with coated seed. Also with pesticides and things depending on what you're coating it with. So there's a purpose for coating in certain situations. But when it comes to food plot seed, you really just want to look at that analysis tag and make sure you're buying the most pure seed you can.
Sure.
Um, don't look. We have one mix with ryegrass, but ryegrass to me isn't really. It's a filler, in a way, but deer will eat it, but they're only going to eat it when it's 2 to 3 inches high, and then once it gets overgrown, they're not going to touch it.
Okay.
So mixes with a lot of ryegrass, I would steer away from. Um, some guys might swear by ryegrass. It's preference, right? But what sets us apart really, is our buckets, and we pride ourselves on fresh seed. So getting last year's lots, selling the 2024 lots in our buckets with the best germination. And the reason we do that is because let's say we don't sell or we sell to a resale store and they have some carryover. Well, we have very fresh seed, and depending on the variety, the germination is barely going to go down. If it has a 95% germ, might be 93 the next year. It takes a couple years, depending on the varieties of seeds, for the germ to go down. Beans, peas, that germination rate definitely decreases more a lot quicker than other varieties like brassicas and clovers. But we order our seed in small batches. We don't like sitting on a large amount of seed, and we try to find the best and the freshest seed with
Sure.
no weeds in it as well.
Yeah, I mean, I would think that's huge. Um, I had a question here, and actually, I got several here, but I don't want to jump to that one just quite yet. So, what specifically are people looking for then? Like, or what should people be looking for when they're looking at their packaging? And I'm not trying to, steer people, to a different product or anything like that. But what is that one thing in the ingredients? When you're saying like you're looking at certain things, what are those things that you guys offer that maybe not every company is offering? Am I asking that right?
Yeah, you are, and I'll try to answer it the best I can.
Sure.
But the biggest thing is, we have a really nice looking bucket, right? So you can look at the bucket and be like, "Ooh, that product looks really nice," right? Or
Hmm.
some other people have the flashy logos, the flashy packaging. What I'm going to tell people is turn around the package and look at the analysis tag on those buckets and see what varieties of seed are in there, because the analysis tag is going to tell you, what's the highest content of the seed.
Sure.
So, like, for instance, in a clover blend, if there's, so let's say there's Ladino, there's medium red, and then there's crimson clover. There's a bunch of crimson clover. I mean, crimson clover has its purpose. Its purpose is to fixate nitrogen. It's not super attractive to deer. They're going to eat it, but it's not as highly sought after as like a Ladino or a medium red type of clover. So,
Okay.
find what you're looking for and just make sure that the percentage of the seed in that mix on the analysis tag has a high percentage of it. Now, if you have a mix and there's 50% ryegrass, or let's say you want a Nebraska mix and there's 70% rape, and then there's 20% radish and 10% turnips. Well, rape and radishes, deer like them, they love them. But they're a little bit more cost effective, right? So, as a consumer, you got to look at what your end goals are. What is the variety that you want to plant, and just make sure you're looking at the back of that packaging and checking out the analysis tag.
Yeah, I think a good example would be is like, when I was looking for food plots, I grew up in Southwest Wisconsin and, hunted the bluff areas along the Mississippi and everything, and then moved up further north, and, just trying to find good food plots to match different areas. I was always looking at the shelves and being like, oh, good clover blend. And then I look at the back and it'd be, 85% Italian ryegrass. And that got frustrating to me. And I guess a little background on me is then I started a outdoor business selling food plot seed as well, just because I was sick of
Okay.
buying those blends that have a lot of those fillers in it. And
Yeah.
then over the years of doing that, just to basically have good blends for myself, and then friends and family all wanted some, and then I met Scott, and Scott had the same values where we wanted good quality seed in every blend, and you weren't wasting your money on mixers. And a lot of people buying these products, they don't know, and they're just
Right.
they see the overs, they see the big bucks on the pictures, and they're like, that'll work, and then they get all this let's say Italian ryegrass that comes up or something, and then so that's when I joined up with Scott here, because I really liked the values that he was, going after, and they really matched up with what I wanted to do, and kind of wanted to conquer that together then. And so I
Sure.
feel like just, knowing what you want, what your end goal is, and what you want to plant, and then looking at those back analysis tags and figuring out what percentages of each one of those seeds are in there, because you'd be surprised on, a lot of the stuff on the shelves, how much stuff might be in it that you might not want.
Right. Yeah, and in terms of like how many pounds you're buying, how much is it actually what you're looking to plant?
The labeled clover blend might only be 40% clover in there.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Mixes, where our clover mixes are,
Right? It's what is our Clover Madness is 89% clover and then 11% alfalfa. If you break it down, because when you look at seeds, sometimes there's a little bit of inert matter, whether it's dirt or dust or whatever. You know what I mean? So it's close to those percentages. We usually sell most of our seeds in a raw form. Sometimes we do have a coated form of the seed, but we really do try to find the raw form of the seed, just because you get more seed content versus that filler of the coating. And it kind of evens out, in my opinion. If you got more seed versus the coating, you might get better germination. Without the coating, you have more seed, so you're going to get roughly the same germination, in my opinion.
Okay.
So I don't know, Sam, what do you think about that?
I mean, I work with dairy farmers all over Wisconsin. I grew up in agriculture, went to school for agriculture, and the coating on alfalfa is always a big subject. And I've done studies on both, and we've done side by side comparisons, and it can all go back to the timing that it gets planted, the soil temp and all that stuff. And the coating does help. It helps protect that seed. It helps that seed germinate better. But you also don't want to have too much coating. So there's finding that in between.
Right.
And just, I think trusting a company too to bring you a good product. And we've always, used all these blends on the properties we hunt. So, I mean, that's kind of how we both had started, is like we wanted these blends for ourselves because we didn't like a lot of the other blends. So we created a lot of these blends to be able to hunt over ourselves. And, we're not going to be putting together blends that don't make sense.
Sure.
Yeah, we don't want people to plant our stuff and not come back, right?
Right.
So
Yeah.
we're about repeat customers, and if people don't have a good success, I would love for them just to reach out so we can figure out, was it the seed? I mean,
Yeah.
it could be, but typically, people may have just not prepped the ground right. They might have planted too deep. People just think sometimes they can just throw out the seed and on the on ground that they haven't even scratched and expect it to grow, right? The whole throw and
Sure.
grow methodology like that obviously doesn't work. I mean, some of it might germinate and go, but
Yeah.
you obviously got to work your ground. You got to, for optimal results, you want to do soil testing. I mean, that's a really big thing. Get your pH level right. Find out what nutrients are in your soil.
Yeah.
So you don't waste money on fertilizer, first of all, and so you know what fertilizer to buy, right? Instead of just, oh, I'm just going to go buy a bunch of fertilizer and put it down and everything's going to go great, right? So,
Yeah, 100%. In fact, I think that's where a lot of frustration comes for certain guys, is, the lack of soil tests and not knowing, what fertilizer to use. I mean, yes, the information is out there, right? But it can also get convoluted and confusing too at times. Whether you're parts of, I mean, there's different Facebook groups that specialize in that. And I think those are the ones where things really get confusing, because you get a lot of guys that are very advanced in it and that. And as a newcomer, you come in and you just like, your head wants to explode. Like, I just want to till the ground, hope for some good rain in that, spread the stuff out. And,
I mean, there's a lot of factors that go into food plotting, right? It's not just an easy thing to do.
yeah,
And there is so much information out there too. And not only that, a lot of some people swear there's a right and a wrong way to do things. I mean, there's a variety of ways to do things. Um, one thing that works for one guy may not work for another guy. And that can be because of soil, can be because of when they plant, can be because of how they prep the ground. Did they kill weeds there? A lot of people till their ground, right? And when you till your ground, depending on how deep you go, there's a lot of weed seeds that are just sitting in that ground.
yeah,
So you till it, you turn it over, you're bringing all those those seeds to the surface, and then guess what's going to happen? They're going to germinate, right? So you get all that weed seed growing. So if you got a fresh food plot, you got to take the time. You got to work your ground. You got to let it sit. You got to spray it or till it again to re-kill it. And the depth of things may matter as well. So you till the first time, you're tilling 6 inches. That second time only go a couple inches just to kill what's on the surface. If guys don't want to use chemicals, that's a method to do as well.
sure.
And then using the right chemicals is that's another big thing that.
Sure.
And chemicals can be so confusing because a lot of the blends that people sell, they have all the different varieties, right? Some kill broadleaves, some kill grasses, some only kill certain types of broadleaves. So you got to do your homework in order to get your best results, and you got to put time into it.
Well, and I think spraying early, like I always tell guys, if you're working a new plot up and let's say it's CRP ground or something, and it's spraying in the spring when those weeds are only a few inches tall and getting a good kill there, and then spray again mid-July, knock those weeds down again, and then I always like to, if you're using a good herbicide without a residual in it, a lot of people think you can't plant your seed and spray. Well, your 2,4-D or glyphosates, that type of stuff, there's no residual in it, so that's the soil neutralizes it, and so you can actually then spray one more time and plant your brassica seeds right into that, and the spray is not
right into this. Okay, that's interesting.
And so, I mean, you do have to look at the labels and what sprays you're using because some do have residuals, but if it's a non-residual herbicide, like a lot of people think if they spray glyphosate, it's going to stay in the soil, and that's not true. I mean, you can spread your seed and spray glyphosate right over top of it, because glyphosate acts on the, it goes against the photosynthesis of the plant.
Yeah.
There has to be a plant there for it to kill, and there's no
Right.
residue.
So right now we're beginning of June. Is it too late for guys to be planting right now, or should they just be more focusing on prepping for a fall plot? Let's say your fresh ground that you want to get something going. What are your thoughts on that in terms of the timing right now, say here in the upper Midwest, Wisconsin, Minnesota, Michigan, kind of
Yep.
northern Illinois?
Sam and I can both tackle this question. I think we'll both give our perspectives on it. It depends what your end goal is, right?
Mhm.
If you still want to get clover, alfalfa in the ground, I definitely think there's still time. You got to play the weather, play the rain, and just make sure your soil's ready for it, right? Another thing to consider is where the food plot is. A lot of guys that are planting food plots might be planting a plot in the middle of the woods. A little bit of sunlight, your clovers, alfalfa, once that canopy's up, they're not going to do as good as what they would have done if you had planted earlier.
Okay.
But is it too late? No, I don't think it's too late for those clover, alfalfa, chicory type of plots. You definitely can get those in the ground still. Get your ground right, and then obviously just try to plant it right before it rains so it's not sitting there.
Yeah, I mean, if you don't want to feel rushed and trying to get like clover, alfalfa, or chicory, or spend the money, I guess, because those seed blends can be a little bit more expensive usually. This time of year, I recommend guys, if they want to get out and start working the ground up and start doing something, spray it off, work that ground up, and then plant something like buckwheat or rye. Let that grow up. Buckwheat does great for 6 to 8 weeks. And then go back and either crimp it or till it under. And then if you don't want to till it, you can usually crimp it and you can spread your brassicas in then, late August, early September, depending on exactly where you're at, and then crimp that rye off, and the brassica blends will come up through. The buckwheat and the rye is just going to basically act as a nurse crop. So if right now it's full of weeds and you want to start doing something, you want to till it under, you don't want it just to come back with weeds, plant a nurse crop. Like I said, rye or buckwheat or oats,
triticale, which
Italian ryegrass isn't going to really get grazed on much. That always works better for your logging trails and stuff. But like a cereal rye, you could plant that. They might graze on it a little bit here and there. Buckwheat, oats, and then just crimp it off, till it under, and put your brassicas or even your clover. You can put clover into it. That clover will germinate in the fall, and then even then the following spring, all that'll start coming back up the following spring, and you can kind of decide then what you want to do that following spring, whether you want to keep it clover again or there's a lot of, it always depends on your end goals, but
right. There's not one going back. There's not a right and a wrong way. It depends what your goals are. Sam's just touching on cover cropping, right? Really suppressing the weeds. So planting those cover crops just for intentions of planting something in the fall, right? Or I should say late summer.
If you don't want to have to do all the work in the fall, you can kind of start those things now. Get something living growing out there.
Yeah. And I always categorize food plotters in different categories, right? You have I would say your typical food plot person where they focus mostly on their fall planting. And then you got your more serious guys that are really diving into it. They're planting things in the spring. They're planting the cover crops. They're planting, their beans, their corn, and then they're also thinking about prepping for those fall plots with the cover crop plots.
Sure.
So there's just different varieties, right? And there's not a right way. There's not a wrong way to do things. Yeah, you got to experiment with your land. Don't be afraid to reach out to other people and hit up Facebook or Google and ask some questions.
Do be careful on Facebook.
Right. Be careful.
A lot of wrong answers out there.
Sure.
Always get a second opinion.
Yeah.
That's
look for the common answer that you see a lot of.
Common answer.
Yeah, makes sense.
Whatever answer you see, definitely go plug it into Google and make sure that it's validating. Right.
So you were saying when you're talking like cover plants and that, actually this is a question that I wanted to bring up. Been seeing a lot of stuff with what is it, miscanthus?
Yep.
Am I saying that right?
Yep.
There's I've been seeing a lot of stuff that you can do the barriers and that creates security around your food plots, access to your stands, those kinds of things. Um, but what I've been hearing a lot of is that it's an invasive species.
Yes.
And
Yeah,
is that true?
that is 100% true. That is an invasive species. So you need to control it, in other words,
Okay.
right? So that is a great product. I'm not going to bash that product or anything like that. It's got its purpose, but you got to
Hmm.
maintain it. It is hard to plant. In my opinion, it's also kind of expensive to plant. Where if you go with a higher growing switchgrass, some of the best switchgrass on the market right now is the RC Big Rock. It grows pretty tall, it grows quickly compared to past varieties of it. But if you break it down per cost per acre, management wise, there's a lot of options. So
Okay.
um, Miscanthus is a good option, but it's harder to plant. It's a little bit more costly. Um, Switchgrass is costly too, but if you break it down per how much you're actually going to plant, if you're doing, just depends on if you're making it for bedding with switchgrass or for a barrier. For a barrier, you just got to go thicker so deer don't actually want to bed in it. And then there's annual choices too, right? With screening mixes. Sorghum is really what it is. Egyptian wheat, it's a variety of sorghum.
Yeah.
And there's all sorts of varieties of sorghum that can be planted. Forage sorghum. There's short. There's tall. Like Milo, that's a big thing right now. The red Milo, that's technically a forage sorghum. It grows ahead. Deer don't touch it. Once it grows ahead, deer will touch it. But you can use that as a barrier, but it only grows 4 feet tall, right?
I
But
was just going to ask, like, what kind of height can you get with some of these like switch
yeah,
grasses and
so
sorghums?
switchgrass, you can get up to 8 feet if you got optimal conditions. It's going to take a couple years to get to that point,
Hmm.
but 6 feet, right around 6 feet, is really a nice benchmark for switchgrass. Um, the sorghums, I mean, I planted sorghum that has gotten 12 feet tall. I mean,
Wow.
you can really get some sorghum that grows really tall, but in turn, it's also, as a food plot, it's a little harder to get rid of too because you got this big stalk, 12 feet tall, you're going to have a bigger stalk. So you got to figure out how you're going to take care of it, mow it down, and get it off the ground and ready to replant something else, right? So you got to have strategy as far when it comes to planting those barriers. And another big thing with like food plots, you said stand access, right?
Hmm.
Uh, when you hunt your food plots, if you have this wide open food plot, you don't have a good access to your stand, you better be real careful about how you're going to hunt that food plot because
Yeah.
you're going to blow those deer off. They're going to probably come back and eat your food plot, but you're going to make them nocturnal.
Right.
Um,
Maybe more at nighttime. Yeah, exactly.
right. So use it to your advantage. Pick your stand locations. Use screening to get to your plots. And another big thing is, let's say you got a 5 acre food plot. Um, some strategies that really work well is sectioning off that food plot, meaning, basically create a barrier in the middle or section off into 4 different sections. And the idea there is these bucks, right? I mean, that's what we're ultimately, and goal is we want to shoot mature deer, mature
Hmm.
bucks.
Yeah.
You section off these plot, well, that buck has to travel. It can't just poke its head out of the woods, look into that whole five
Yeah.
acre food plot and be like, oh, yeah, no, there's nothing out here for me to see, right?
Right.
You plant the berry, you section them off. That buck's going to go and check every one of those areas to see what's in it. So those
Sure.
are definitely some good strategies to utilize with the screening mixes.
I
Yeah.
think one of the biggest mistakes I see people make with some of the screening is not planting them wide enough. And like I see it time and time again. I think they can, plant 3, 4 feet wide and then it looks fine. It's growing up and then it gets to the fall hunt season and you can really start to see through it. And just
Sure.
like I always recommend, 12 to 15 feet wide. Sometimes that's a little wider than a lot of people think, but it just helps create that screen thicker so that they can't
Right.
see
Create. Yeah. So that
And
you
you got to
can't.
think about the elements too.
blowing over and
Rain, we get
rain.
heavy winds.
I've seen just so many people try to do a couple feet and it fails miserably every time. It's like
Sure.
put in more than you think, wider wise than
Minimum 10 feet. That's what I always tell guys.
12 to 15 is always a good.
Okay.
Right. You got the space, do that 15 because it's going to be very
Yeah.
to have cover longer.
What are your yeah, I mean that's really what's a good tip right there for sure. Because I feel like yeah, that's a mistake that could easily be made. Like, oh, that's plenty thick enough or wide enough, and they're thinking it's gonna be thick enough, and that next thing you know, you're crawling on your hands and knees and that trying to get past or whatever, maybe try to get to your stand or they just simply don't feel that secure because they can kind of see through it too. So, what are your thoughts on like the quote unquote kill plots or those let's say I'll take for example one of my properties in that I'm adjacent to an alfalfa field that gets heavily used and that by the deer throughout the summer and early fall, and that but like kind of a plot for staging, where especially the mature bucks and whatnot aren't really ready to step out because it's still daylight and it's not the rut or whatever. It's maybe a little earlier in the season, early October. About something like that, maybe in your woods.
So, kill plots are super beneficial, right? Like you said, I mean, you kind of hit all the points there as far as the purpose of a kill plot. It is a plot that the deer are going to come to before they hit the egg fields, the bigger plots or the bigger egg fields, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's the goal of a kill plot, right? But you also got to be very strategic. You have a kill plot. You don't want to be hunting your kill plot all the time. You want to wait for the, we have cell cams now. We typically know the deer, and we know how deer move. You got to follow the pressure. You got to follow the wind. You got to follow the weather. You got to follow the moon. If people say I'm bonkers because of that, great. But wait for the optimal time to hunt that kill plot, because if you don't do it, what's going to happen is you're going to go into that kill plot. And guess what? You're expecting that buck to come in there. Well, he's probably pretty close to there, but he hasn't quite come there yet just because all the conditions aren't right. And you're going to get out of your stand and you could bump him off, right? Or scare him for, you might not scare him out of the area, but he's just not going to, he's going to be more at,
uneasy
to come into that plot earlier like he has been, right? So really just be strategic about it. Don't get too excited. Be patient and just hunt those kill plots at the right time.
Yeah. I always tell guys like easy access, being able to get in there quiet without going through where they're possibly bedding. And then also, I don't know if people agree, disagree, but I will never hunt them in the morning. So like always an evening hunt when you can get in there early and, not disturb them when they may be on that plot. And so that you're there ready when they are staging in that kill plot to go out into the egg field is usually, we all know what, that 45 minutes before, dark. And so, there's been times where I've went into those types of plots in the morning and we'll have a cell cam around and we'll bump them off in the morning, and not being able to see that, I don't like it. So, evening hunts, get in there early, or an all day hunt, get in there after light, walk in an hour and a half after light, sit all day. And then quiet, easy access without going through those bedding areas is the best way to manage a
Sure. Yeah, I think, I mean, like you said, it's not only just about being careful, but it's also maybe the spots that you're going to put this to, access points, where the deer are traveling from bedding to these food or water sources, whatever your layout looks like. But of course, then what is your access going to be like to get there? I mean, I'm thinking, my brain's spinning right now with just the different spots that I have and how I have to access those depending upon the wind. What is the predominant wind typically? West, right? We're mostly getting west winds. So, you're trying to come in from the east on those. But then where is the bedding in relationship to that too? Where are they normally accessing these egg fields from and trying to intercept that corridor, I guess,
And their animals, they're smart, right? They put themselves in the best possible position
Oh
with
yeah.
the wind, right? So they know where the wind's going to be, and you gotta figure out where they're bedding with the certain winds, and obviously hunt the right locations at the right time.
And you
Sure.
might fail figuring out some of these things, and that's okay, right? We're
Right.
all
It's
gonna fail doing these things, and that's how you learn. And I think, I've been hunting this property down in Southwest Wisconsin for 5, 6 years, and there's quite a few mature bucks on there, and I feel like we've failed a lot of times, but every time we do, we learn more, and we've got some nice bucks out of there, and it's the name of the game. That's why we all love it. That's why we keep coming back, because you
right.
learn.
It's a chess match. Right.
It's a chess match,
And
exactly.
you're always learning.
Yep.
You're always learning. If you're not, then you're treading water, and you're not. It's all about growth, right?
Yeah.
And the more you learn, I feel like it should be a tagline, or what was the
Yeah.
thing Mr. T used to say all the time? Back on the Saturday morning. Okay, now I'm dating myself. Never mind. Let's keep her moving here.
That'd be a good T-shirt on the back. It's a chess match, and then a picture of a big white tail.
Yeah. um, is there before I want to get into some of the bucks that you've killed here, Scott? And but before I do that, is there any new product that's new for 2025? Anything?
So we
Um,
didn't really come up with anything new this year, but
mhm.
we're starting to push biologicals a little bit more. So um, other than utilizing fertilizer, biologicals bring a little bit different aspect to the food plot game. There's different varieties of them, but what it is the bacteria, and there's different forms of bacteria, and these, this has been around for a long, long time. People use them in their gardens, and in the egg industry, it's actually becoming pretty predominant. And that's where I got the idea. My father-in-law works for a company that sells these biologicals, and he got me on them. It just, you see a much better result um, with them. So there's different varieties of them. Either they work with your soil, or they work directly with the plant, and how you apply them. So we have right now we have a plot assist. That one is a powdered granular form. You just mix it with the seed, and that works with your soil. It introduces microbes into the soil, and it really helps grow a really nice root system, and it helps those plants really ingest all the nutrients that they need to be their optimal selves. And there's other products that we are trialing right now that work. You got to spray them. You got to plant them in foliar, or plant them. Once the plant starts growing, you spray them on, and that is a nitrogen fixating product, and that product will release next year. But that one, works directly with the plant. It allows the plant to use the air and the nitrogen that we breathe in our air. It helps it absorb more of the nitrogen. Um,
Okay.
so that's like our latest thing that we're pushing. We have a couple of things in the work that I'm not going to really discuss yet, just because
Yeah.
once we get it together and get it rolled out, we'll be talking about it.
Sure.
Um, but exciting things to happen, and like Sam here, he just joined the Buck.It Ready, and we got a few other guys that are joining the Buck.It Ready crew here, and we're really creating a great group of guys that we're going to do a lot of fun stuff with.
That's awesome. Fantastic. All right. I wanted to bring up here because Kill, I believe all three of these bucks were the last 3 years.
So last year I went buckless. I actually, I'll
Okay.
just dive into that story a little bit, but I shot one of the biggest deer, that probably my second biggest deer that I would have under my belt. It was all of 160. Might have been a little bit bigger than that. I got a 170 under me right now, but I hit him. I hit him high, and I knew I hit him high. My arrow was sticking out of him as he ran away from me. I wasn't super confident in the shot, and I kind of knew that. I waited for a few hours before I got out of my stand, and I just went and looked, and I walked 50 yards, and we found bubbles in the blood. So I'm like, well, I hit a lung,
Yeah.
um, and end result is we never found the deer. He showed back up on camera about 2 weeks later. So he's alive and well, and he's going to be a
Well,
whole
that's
lot
good.
bigger this year, maybe a little bit more wacky. But those they are tough animals, man. I probably only clipped one of his lungs, which is why we didn't have a whole lot of bubbles, but we definitely had multiple sections where there was bubbles in the blood, and just it happens, right? The deer busted me. I had to rush a shot a little bit, um, and I wish I would have aimed just a little bit further back. I think I clipped the front of his shoulder, top front of his shoulder, and just might have ricocheted and hit one of the top part of the lung.
Sure.
But these other deer, those are the previous 3 years, I think. Uh, Most of the deer, the one on the left, on my left, or on the everybody's looking, but
Down
uh, yeah,
this one here.
they all are food plot related. The
Okay.
one on the left, I didn't shoot in a food plot. I shot him in a funnel, but we had him all year round using all of our food plots. One in the middle, that one was taken off a food plot. That food plot actually didn't turn out that great that year because the deer just hammered it. I didn't fence it off, and there was a bunch of brassicas and stuff still growing in it, but the deer kept it mowed down. But they were still using it, and I still had a good result with it.
So this one here that I just pulled up,
Yep.
and is that the
So
one
that
with
yeah. So let's
the
talk about
sorghum
that
grass behind
deer.
you?
Yeah, that deer was using the food plots. He was on our property all year round. And funny story about him is, I was hunting this little funnel in between a valley. I was on like in the midsection of the valley, in between
Mm-hmm.
two valleys, and this is why cell cameras should almost be cheating. Because about 200 yards away, I had a cell cam in a food plot, and he crossed. And one of my other buddies sent a text, "Hey, where are you guys hunting? Like, is anyone seeing this deer?" And I immediately looked. And I'm like, "Oh, that was about 10 minutes ago." And I just grabbed my horns and I started rattling. And lo and behold, here comes this deer a couple minutes later. Um, and I smoked him. He went 30 yards and collapsed. But still a cool story. But still, cell
Mm-hmm.
cams. We'll talk about those a little bit. They're great to have. I love watching and sitting there when I wake up in the morning and I'm using the restroom and I sit there and scroll through the 100 photos I got going on.
Yeah.
Um, but at the same time, it can be cheating, right? In that scenario, I would have, maybe would have never picked up my horns or picked up my call. But since I got that intel, I obviously wanted to try to get that deer to come closer to me, and turns out it
Sure.
worked.
Or vice versa. Maybe he would have came through, been a little too far, and you made a bad shot and
Yeah.
wounded him. So
Yeah,
it can,
right. You just don't know.
can be goods and bads.
Yep.
Yeah. All right. I'm just gonna bring this one up here and try to bring it up here just a little bit here so people get a little bit better look. What's the story on this one here?
This deer I probably shouldn't have taken. It was like right at last light, and I let an arrow fly on him. Um, there was two different. We had a really big 6-pointer, Magnum 6-pointer, and then this deer, and you can see he's just an 8, but he's got smaller broad tines. Um, it happened really quick, so I wasn't 100% sure which deer it was. But I decided to, he was 20 yards from me. I still had plenty of light left, and I let an arrow fly. But he came out right into the food plot, started eating, and I let an arrow fly on him, and the rest is history.
Looks like a real nice 8-pointer. I mean,
Yeah, it's like 100 and maybe a 130 at most, but
sure.
it's a nice deer.
Nothing wrong with that at all.
All right.
And then let me just bring up this one here. A little bit bigger shot of it, anyways.
So this deer, I wasn't on a self-planted food plot. I was just hunting on a property where a farmer planted.
What?
Yeah, whoop, what? I was using a piece of property that I hunt. I have other little food plots, kill plots on that property, but a lot of
Sure.
it is egg fields, and wherever the deer are, I'm going to hunt.
Mm-hmm.
But I was using a decoy in the egg field, and that year it was beans, and there was multiple bucks in the field that night. It was a crazy night. There's like this little holler in in the middle of the field, and he was fighting with this really wide 8 pointer that I had on camera. Um, they were fighting. All of a sudden, I saw the wide one. You know, he went away. I couldn't get his attention. But then all of a sudden he popped up because I was being pretty vocal. I was calling, rattling, trying to get those deer, trying to catch their attention, right?
Right.
And well, this deer must have stayed around. All of a sudden I saw him poke his head over. I made a couple more calls. He came a little bit closer, and he had to come to a certain point so he could see the decoy. So I made the right calls at the right times, and luckily he finally saw the decoy and he came right into it. I didn't have to call again. He started puffing out. Man, that was a pretty special deer. Just my first decoy buck. That was the first time I shot a deer on a decoy.
What
Um,
kind of decoy were you using?
oh man, what are some of the brands here? I'm gonna have to go to my phone.
Buck or doe.
Oh, a buck or doe decoy. I was using a buck decoy. It
Yeah,
was it was like shot that one on Halloween.
sure. I mean, I think one of the popular ones is the flambeau.
Yeah, it was a flambeau. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, I've
One of the
got,
nice one of the
I've
nicer
got,
ones when we bought it from Cabela's.
yeah. I think with those flambeaus, I mean, there's some that you can convert to a buck or a doe, and you can change the ear size on them and different things, and that. For me though, it's always like, man, I've got one,
Yeah.
and I can count on one finger the amount of times I use it because I'm like, between carrying camera equipment out and that, I'm
Oh yeah.
like, oh my God, I don't want to
It is
lug
so
this thing
bulky
out.
and they're noisy. That's the other
Oh,
thing.
the plastic clinking around, whether you shove the
So
legs inside the belly and,
right.
or
So
you
what I
just,
did, I mean, I drove to the spot earlier in the day. I dumped the decoy out, and then I left. And then when I went back hunting, I obviously set the decoy up.
you
So
know,
it just made it easier. It was a good spot.
well, good on you
Oh,
for getting it done on one.
what'd you
Yeah.
That's,
say?
I said, good on you for getting it done on one and,
Right.
going through the effort to do it. I'm always like real spooked out too. Like if I'm putting that out there, I'm walking in the area that I'm expecting this deer to come in, like your timing really needs to be right where, this buck is going to probably just throw caution to the wind anyways. Right.
Oh yeah.
Um, I
I mean,
mean,
I sprayed him down that decoy. I sprayed him down with scent killer, and then I also used Wiggs hunting scents to help out too. So
sure.
I'm a big fan of Evercalm. That stuff I feel like works well. I don't leave my truck without it because I put it on my boots, and I like using a lot of mock scrapes when I'm hunting as well. The smell of dirt obviously triggers deer senses and
Hmm.
also gives them a calm feeling. So um,
Sure.
I get out of my truck, I walk 10 feet from the truck, and I make a mock scrape so my boots are smelling like dirt.
Hmm.
Um, scent is a huge thing, right? I mean, that's the key. You got to cover your scent. You got to be very diligent and make sure that those animals aren't smelling you.
Yeah.
But
Well,
decoys in general, they have their purpose, right? But yeah, I don't use them all the time just because it's an inconvenience. And I've had it where they scare away deer as well, right? Especially
yeah,
does. That's what sucks about a decoy. If you don't have an aggressive buck, he's not going to come in, or a non-aggressive buck will not come into a decoy. You have does. I mean, sometimes does are kind of curious and they will check out a decoy, but I would say more than 50% of does are going to see a buck decoy, especially like during the rut when they're going to use those decoys. They don't want to be cased. They want to steer clear of a buck unless they're coming into heat. So
sure, sure. Sam, like I said, I found out a little bit later on this afternoon that you were going to be joining in that. Um, do you want to talk about it? I don't have any pictures to show or whatever, but how was last season for you?
I also went buckless last season.
Okay,
Same thing kind of happened with Scott. I had one of our target bucks come in chasing a doe, and we have food plots set up in some different areas. And I hunt in Southwest Wisconsin, kind of a little north of the Mississippi River there, and we I don't hunt over any food plots just in that area, but we have them in spots, around in strategic areas, and usually catch the bucks coming back and forth, checking those food plots during rut. And it's 3.5 hours away from where I live now, so I have coming up on 3 kids now, so I only get down there a select amount of time. So
Yeah.
during ruts, the big time, so I set up a lot for those reasons. But the does are often active in those plots and get the bucks cruising back and forth on these ridge lines. And we had one buck that I was after last year and never got him. And then again, we had him this year, and he came in chasing a doe at exact what I wanted. I just wasn't ready. It was a real windy day, and I was kind of huddled up. And he
Yeah.
came in, and I don't know, 35 yards, and I don't know what happened.
Did you hit him?
Yeah, just in through the brisket. But again, we had pictures of him again the day before gun season, and then I sat gun season all week and never saw him. And then 2 weeks after gun season, we had more pictures, and now we're getting pictures this spring when I'm pretty sure it's him again. So hopefully get another shot at him. But previous to that, I've got a handful of decent bucks out of Southwest Wisconsin. The biggest one's a 161 9-pointer, so that's
Nice.
my biggest one, and it was during gun season though, so nothing compared to Scott here for bow, but a handful of 130s, 140s with the bow, but still after
Sure.
the real big one with the bow. But yeah, I mean, like I said, there it just doesn't. I hunt 80 acres, and it just seems like hunting. There's a lot of egg fields around there, and hunting the actual plots. There's just no easy way for us to get to them without bumping the bedding areas, and so we're pretty strategic about just trying to be set up them coming and going from those food plots. So. And
Right.
I hunt a lot of public land by the Mississippi River. A lot of island hunting, swamp hunting, and gotten real close to getting some of the big swamp bucks. But man, they are hard and they're elusive. And when they come through hot. And with those bluffs, it's like the thermals in the bluffs are hard. You might think you're hunting one wind, and that wind drops down and hits those. It's swirling and it drives down. I mean, it is just tough, but they get big, and I'm still
You're using milkweed, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, you got to. Well, that's great. That's great to hear that. If our good friend Dan Infault happens to catch us, he'll be excited to hear somebody on the show talking about hunting marshes and swamps and stuff out on public land.
Oh, he loves going through the wettest shit you possibly can go.
Hey, that's the only way you get to the big bucks. You gotta get out of the parking lots.
Dan is Dan's nuts, and I mean in a good way. Like, I don't know, a few weeks back or whatever, I was out in one of the marshes with him. We had some guys in from Huntstock from Massachusetts that came in and wanted to see some of the spots that Dan had killed, a handful of his biggest bucks. And we're trudging around these cattail marshes, and you're on deer trails, but you can't actually walk on them.
Yeah.
If you walk on the deer trail itself, you're going to be up to your waist.
You need marsh skis.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, you're literally just you're walking from side to side, pushing down the cattails and the reeds and that to stay up. And I remember at one point, Dan's like, "Yeah, don't step there." And I said, "Yeah, I wasn't planning on it." He's like, "If you do," he's like, "I'll save your hat and send it to your wife and kid." Like, it is no joke. I mean, and then,
but if you can make it back to those high islands in those marsh areas, man.
Yeah.
During rut, that's where those bucks are going to be.
I mean, they'll tell you all year round. I mean, we literally jump deer, and the amount of beds you'd find out there was crazy. Yeah, I'm like, that's a whole different ball game right there. And you better be happy with the deer that you take out there. Like, it better be worth it. Because
it better be worth it because
you a long time.
Drag.
Yeah. Quarter, register them and then quarter them out. We've done that in the past,
or use them for a flotation device. You do that too.
Yeah. I mean, I've asked him, I said, how long is it taking you to get some of these bucks out of here? He's like, "Yeah, you shoot them in the evening and that, and sometimes, the sun's coming up and that." And he's not lying. I mean, I know it.
For sure.
Especially with some of the sizes of the bucks that he's taken. I mean, just absolute monsters. But anyways, this is the Midwest Racks and Rods Outdoor Show. So but that's cool though. That Southwest area, I mean, even outside of, getting away from the marshes and that, it's very hilly. Like you said, the bluffs and that. I've hunted down there a couple times myself, public land hunting, and It's those bluffs are no joke either.
You can come up on a straight vertical drop on a bluff that's 125-foot drop real quick, and you're like,
Yeah,
or a a ravine or crevice that's like a buck goes down and dies in that. I've had buddies that have had to get winches and hook them up to trees and
sure,
winch them out because you're not getting them out of those, and that's where they always seem to go and die.
right.
Is those real steep ravines.
Yeah, I've got a buck over on another wall over here from many years ago, from uh, mid to late '90s. In that was in Trempealeau County, and that probably a little bit further north there, north of La
Yep.
Crosse and stuff. And that thing was a bear to get out. I mean, just probably 140 inch buck or whatever, but trying to get it up, through those bluffs and stuff is it's a workout, and you'll figure out real quickly what kind of shape you're in.
Yeah,
Dragging
I
out
thought
a
I was
deer,
in
I don't
pretty
care what
decent
kind of
shape,
terrain.
but yeah, it's fun though. Makes it more rewarding.
Absolutely.
Especially when you get it back to the truck, right?
Yeah, you
Yeah.
crack that nice cold one.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's about all I have. Is there anything else that I'm missing here, Scott, Sam? Anything else you guys wanted to touch on this evening?
No, I don't think so, unless Sam's got something. We really appreciate you having us on today, and
I'd love to have you guys back on again and talk more food plot. I think we can get away from some of the other stuff and just maybe do a specific show on food plots themselves. Maybe a little more on the educational side of things, where we set it up maybe like as a Q&A session. Let people come in with their questions and what they're struggling with their food plots, and just kind of like run with it that way, if that's something you guys would be interested in doing. Love to have both of you.
Maybe we can get down in the studio to do that too.
I think that would be a lot of fun doing it that way for sure. I mean,
What I'd say to guys is like, don't give up. I work with dairy farmers that this is their livelihood. They're working agriculture, trying to plant crops, and they fail. So, if you
Sure.
fail on planting something, just, try to do your best to figure out what went wrong and just keep trying, because you'll figure it out. I mean, I fail all the time. I'm like, why didn't this stuff come up? Or why didn't this work? Why didn't this work? And do your soil tests, do your research, and then just make sure you're getting good quality seed. And I think, that sets you up for the best success.
Real quick, in terms of soil tests, and then we'll kind of wrap this up here. Where do you recommend people go with their soil tests? Do you recommend doing the self tests?
I mean, the self test
kind of gets you in a ballpark.
Yeah, it gets you in a ballpark. It's not going to be 100% accurate, I would say. Check your local co-ops. We offer soil tests through Egg Sources. We used to use Rock River. They're another great option to utilize as well. So soil test pricing has increased a little bit, unfortunately, but there are some cost-effective methods out there. There's other companies that sell their soil tests. So the main thing is just test your soil, right? Test your soil, send it in, and when you're doing a soil test, for every acre, we'll say a couple acres, you want to go to 5 different spots in that food plot, make it a nice variety, go 5 inches deep, put that all in a bucket, mix it together, take a scoop of that out, and then put it into your brown bag and send it in, or bring it into your local co-op for them to perform the analysis. So you don't want to just go to one spot or 2 spots. I would say a minimum of 5 to really get a good general idea of what your soil's at. Because one side of your field could be a little bit different than the other side of your field. So it just gives you a nice little overall idea of the overall plot and what you're going to be doing.
Yeah, if you got a low spot, hit the low spots, or a spot that's more sand, more clay. And then, you say they're getting a little bit more expensive, but in the grand scheme of things, if, what used to be $15 now costs, I'm going to go on the way high end and say 50, you're going to save that money and that headache, hands down. You're spending hundreds and hundreds of dollars on seed, hundreds on fertilizer, hundreds on, why not spend a fraction of that on the soil test to make sure, because you might not need certain fertilizer that you think,
right?
You're going to save the cost of the soil test.
And not only that, it also gives you a good idea of what you should plant in that time frame, right? You got a low pH, you got to stick away from certain things. You got a higher pH, you got high nitrogen. Whatever it might be, you're going to want to plant a species of seed that's going to suck up those nutrients, or use products that are going to help your seed, intake those nutrients as well. That's where the biologicals are a great source for higher nutrient dense soils, because it helps take those locked up nutrients and break them down and lets the plants utilize them.
A lot of times the nutrients might be there, but they're just not available, in that chemistry form for those plants to be able to uptake. And that's where those biologicals help break those nutrients down and make them an available form to be able to uptake into the plant.
Okay. Awesome. That's good. Good information. I like I said, I really would think it would be a lot of fun to do that, and it could be extremely informative. So, I want to thank you guys and appreciate you guys joining us tonight. And if you would just stick around here after the show, and we'll chat a little bit more, and maybe we can get something like that planned here.
Sure.
So, yeah. All right, guys.
Thank you.
We're going to go ahead and wrap this episode up. Thank you guys. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Midwest Racks and Rods Outdoor Show. Hope you guys found some of this information here helpful and informative. And we'll continue to bring on some great guests for you guys like we did here tonight. So until next time, always outdoors.